Hi, this is Mike, Kilo 3 Delta Oscar. You know, one of the most common things I see with new ham radio operators is they're afraid to get on the repeater. They don't know exactly what the etiquette is on the repeater. And lots of new hams that do get on repeaters still don't understand all the etiquette. So what we have done over the past couple of years is created a repeater etiquette document that's on our website. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through it and talk about some of the different etiquette items. So if you have questions about repeater etiquette, stay right there. We'll be right back with some repeater etiquette. Hi, this is Mike Myers, Kilo 3 Delta Oscar, and this week I want to do a little bit different type of video. No cameras involved, just a little bit of a screen capture. And what I want to do is talk about some repeater etiquette. So, I run a few repeaters here in the area, and we've put together, a bunch of us put together this over a number of years, like an etiquette of how you use repeater, what's the right thing to do, all that kind of stuff. I just want to walk through it. It's one of those things that not everybody thinks about, particularly new operators, but there's some pretty proven techniques, I would say, or etiquette to use on a repeater. So I'm going to walk through this is on our website, and I'll put a link to it. I'm going to walk through this first. So the very first one is Kerchunking. So what Kerchunking is when you push down on the PTT button and you let off, and you hear the repeater come back. If you have a curtsy tone, you'll hear the curtsy tone. And some people will kerchunk the repeater, but they never talk. Don't quite understand what the reasoning behind that is. I've heard some people say they're testing the repeater, but that really doesn't test the repeater, because testing the repeater, you have to figure out if your audio is getting through clear or not. Just because you open the squelch of a repeater doesn't mean your signal is strong or good. So just keep that in mind. But that's why I think the most common thing is. There's also some people around that do that kind of stuff just to annoy people, but the FCC rules state that if you must have an ID at the end of every conversation and every 10 minutes. So if you push down that transmit button, you need to ID yourself before you are done with the repeater. Now, if you're just testing something and you're going to be kerchunking a little bit to test maybe like SWR or something like that, just put a call out there saying, you know, this is K3DO, I'm going to be testing for a few minutes, please ignore any kerchunks. And then when you're done, just say you're done, K3DO, I'm done testing, thank you for your patience, something similar to that. But that's what kerchunking is. It's kind of annoying to a repeater operator, and that's why some people do that a lot, but it also is not a good way to test something. And if you're going to test like an SWR or something like that, just make sure you let people know that you're doing that. Amateur radio repeater has to follow all the same FCC rules and regulations that you do as a licensed operator. The repeater will identify itself every 10 minutes while it's in use. And if you are an FCC licensed operator, you are also required to require every 10 minutes and at the end of a conversation, as I mentioned above. So here's some general courtesy. Language, aside from some techno synchronies inherent in the amateur radio area, just use plain conversational English. This kind of English would be suitable in like television, not R-rated movies. If you have a conflict or you just have a disagreement, you try to avoid starting a conflict on the air or encouraging a conflict on the air. That's something that we will stop as quickly as we can if that is the case. And if it starts to draw strong debate, just try to change the subject to something different. Another thing, this is not CB radio, so we do not use 10 codes. We do not avoid radio ease lingo wherever possible. CB seems to have its own kind of language, and we don't get into that on amateur radio. And amateurs have names, not handles, so that's also another thing. And a lot of new hams have graduated from CB ranks, so we just try to keep the CB lingo off the amateur band as much as possible. Politics and religion. Here's a good one. Do not talk about politics or religion on the air. This includes conspiracy theories around politics, health, and religion. All this does is create conflict, and we want to avoid as much conflict as we can. So please keep that off of the air. Also, don't provide medical advice on the air. Avoid discussions around medicines, treatments. Just like politics and religions, many people have very strong opinions, and it's best to not even start to go there. When you're visiting a new repeater, take some time to monitor before jumping in to get a feel for the type of traffic and the operating mannerisms of that particular system. Every repeater kind of has its own personality, and this just gives you some time to figure out who the people are, how they like to pass things around, and stuff like that. Some repeaters, and I like to think, are very freewheeling, and that's the kind of repeater that I like to operate, is one that's very open to everybody, and that means people are jumping in and out of conversations constantly. Some other ones are probably directed calls on them, and they even discourage rag chewing. Some of them really discourage rag chewing. They don't like you to use it because maybe it's a linked repeater system over a large area, and if you're sitting there for a long rag chew, they just don't like you tying up all the repeaters like that. And there are other ones that are member exclusive repeaters. Just make sure you listen before you talk, and like the old saying goes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Okay, so here's some talk about malicious interference. If there is malicious interference, such as somebody kerchunking over and over again, or somebody keying down with touch tones or rude comments, the best thing to do is just do not acknowledge it. Continue the QSO you have in a normal fashion. If the interference gets to the level where it's impossible to carry on the QSO, just simply end the QSO, and as normally you would do normally, and just move to another frequency or wait until that person gets bored and moves away. By acknowledging them, you are giving them exactly what they want, and we don't want to encourage that. All right, minimum power. Use the minimum power necessary to complete a QSO. However, the minimum power necessary doesn't just mean you're barely opening the repeater receiver squelch. If someone says that you're noisy, increase your power or relocate to take whatever measures you can to improve the signal. Continue to make transmissions after being told your signal is noisy is very inconsiderate and to those listening. And if you are getting to a repeater and you're running, everybody says run the lowest possible. I agree with that to a point. I typically run 20 watts on one of our repeaters here because it's in a very noisy environment. And if you're running low power and you may get other things walking on top of you, you just open the squelch to noise. So you got to kind of figure that out, and that comes back to listening and to a repeater before you start jumping onto it. All right, next one is repeater hogging. You know, as much as we love to have our repeaters active with people, some people won't join into conversation because they feel like they're being interrupted unless they're prompted. So the best thing to do is occasionally invite others that are out there that seem to like to join. So like every couple of times you talk, maybe say, give me a second to see if anybody else wants to join, you know, kind of stuff like that. We want to welcome everybody on the repeater and not have the repeater being like hogged by a single person or group or a couple. If you have a long conversation with somebody, it's better to use your cell phone at that point than hogging up the radio from everybody else. Particularly if it's a very active repeater. I mean, they're great to be used for like on your way home and things like that, but just make sure you include other people and don't hog the repeater. Most repeaters have a courtesy tone, and just before the transmitter stops transmitting, that's just before it stops transmitting. So the big thing here is leave space. The ones that do not will have a squelch tail that will transmit for a second or so after the input carrier or tone drops. After the courtesy tone or carrier drops, if there's no courtesy tone, then you should just wait a second or two before keying up the mic. This gives it's better for the repeater itself to be able to settle down before it starts transmitting again, and you also won't get your words cut off and things like that. So it's just better to leave space. And it also, like kind of above, it gives space for people to jump in if they're willing to jump in there. All right, announcing you're available. When you start looking for someone to have a QSO with on the repeater, unlike on HF, when you call CQ to find someone to talk to on a repeater, calling CQ is not common and not necessary. On a repeater, you can simply put out your call sign and add something like listening, monitoring, or something similar to that. Like it could be K3DO just listening, or K3DO mobile maybe, or K3DO monitor, something similar to that. And that's very something common that I do when I get in the vehicle is I'll just say K3DO mobile and see if anybody's around. They'll answer me back. Putting out a call every couple of minutes should be more than sufficient, and if someone hasn't answered after a few tries, it probably means that they're not around. If someone is listening and wants to QSO, they will answer back, and avoid things like, is anybody out there, or is anybody around on the frequency? Something like that. You just don't want to do that all the time. If you need a test of some kind, that's fine to say, hey, it's K3DO, is anybody around that can do a test with me? That's fine. But just to regularly go out there and say, it's K3DO, anybody out there? That's just not the right way to do it. Just put out your call sign. All right, there's two ways to start a QSO. The directed call, so we talked about above to find people on the repeater to talk to. you want to talk to a specific radio operator. Sometimes you want to find somebody specifically. So you can do a direct call, and a direct call, you put the person's call sign you are looking for, then your call sign. So, like for example, we'll say Aaron is KC3QPJ, it's K3DO. And if he heard that, he would answer back, if you had the ability to answer back. So that's just how you do a directed call. And during this time, just want to put this out there, it's not an invitation for other stations to jump in. If you hear somebody say, like, KC3QPJ, K3DO, wait, because that means I'm looking for Aaron specifically. If you jump in the middle of that, you're interrupting basically what the call I was trying to put out. So wait until nobody answers, or they clear or something. So just don't interrupt somebody looking for a directed call. If you're trying to contact another operator and they do not respond, you can clear the repeater, saying something like K3DO nothing heard, or K3DO clear, stuff like that. And then for monitoring, the second method may seem a little bit obvious, but it's just monitoring the repeater for the frequency and listening for those that are looking to make a contact. People are looking for a contact will put their call sign out there, like I said I did, looking for somebody, or it might just say K3DO mobile, and at that point, you can answer back for the monitoring. And if you're in the here for conversation and you're monitoring conversation and you have something you want to jump into the roundtable, or you want to make a comment, you can just say, you can put your call sign in the break. If they're doing it right, they'll leave a little bit of a break between each person. You can just jump in there real quick and say K3DO, or break, or comment please, something like that to get their attention, and they should join you into the group there. That's kind of what this one is, joining into the QSO. Okay, breaking into QSO, which is kind of what I was just talking about. If there's a QSO going on, breaking the conversation with the word break, or break for priority traffic if it's a priority. Don't really try to use the word break if you can, because it's actually for emergency. All stations should just give immediate priority to any station with emergency traffic, always, so somebody comes on with emergency traffic. For non-emergency, you can just simply put your call sign out there in the break, like I just said. You can use the word break if you want. That's totally up to you. For signal reports, if you're unsure how well you're making in the repeater, just do not chunk the repeater, like I said before. That is not an indication that you're getting to the repeater with good quality. Anytime you use a repeater, you should always identify. And like I said before, if you're using testing, if you do not use the repeater as a target for tuning or aiming antennas. So if you're trying to tune your antenna, please turn off of the repeater frequency and tune your antenna on a simplex frequency or something that's not being used by some kind of device out there. After you get your antenna tuned, you want to jump over the repeater and put out to there, K3DO, can someone give me a signal report, or something similar to that, to make sure that you're getting the repeater okay. Just do not tune your antenna with the repeater frequency in. There's a term called radio check, and it's most often used by CB, or people that came from the CB. Amateur operators do not use radio check, they ask for a signal report. Alright, so for events. During events, do not use the repeater for events or contests without first getting the permission of the local repeater operator or trustee. So if you have a bike race you want to support, before you go using a repeater, make sure you ask permission to use that repeater first. If there is an event going on that is using the repeater, do not start a QSO while the repeater is being used for the event. There are times when there's not a lot of traffic on the net for these events. So when you first start listening to the repeater, you might not know it's in the middle of an event. If you start a QSO, the net control operator, which should politely just let you know the repeater's in use. No harm done. You didn't know there was anything going there. No big deal. From time to time, an amateur may want to demonstrate the capabilities of amateur radio to another non-amateur, or even an amateur if it's a new mode for them maybe. A typical way to do this is to ask for a demo, such as K3DO for a demonstration, and anyone that's listening on the repeater can answer back and go walk through the demonstration with you. Someone during a demo may ask for stations in a particular area to show the range of radio communication. So let's say somebody's looking for a demo that's out of the area, or even if it's over one of the digital modes, maybe they're asking for a particular state or country, something like that. Depends on what they're trying to do. When two or more amateurs are in a QSO, it's often referred to as a roundtable discussion. Such a QSOs usually go in the order of amateur A to amateur B to amateur C, and eventually back to amateur A again to complete the roundtable. So you can add as many amateurs in there that you want. But as soon as you get more than two people, it should be turned into a roundtable and be passed around in a circle. To keep everybody on the same page, when one amateur is done making the transmission, they turn it over to the next station in the sequence. So I would say let's use Aaron again. And if I'm sending it over to Aaron, it'd be KC3 QPJ, this is K3DO, and I would send it over to Aaron, and then he would send it to the next person. He would send it to the next person, or back to me, however many it is. So that's how you do a round table. You get more than 2 people. Okay, linked repeaters. Some repeaters are linked together over very large geographical areas. These repeaters are many times set up for emergency communications, but are open to everyone to use during non-emergencies. So when selecting a repeater to use, consider where you are trying to communicate. If you're wanting to have a QSO with someone on the same repeater you are on, try to find another local repeater and not use the linked repeater system. If you're having a QSO with someone on the same repeater node of a larger linked repeater system, and you are basically broadcasting your local conversation throughout the entire network, using up airtime power, possibly interrupting other people who will need use of the repeater, etc. So it's best if you are going to talk to somebody locally that you use a local repeater, not a linked repeater. Okay, we're going to get into some specific mode etiquettes here. First, all the etiquette above also applies to DMR. But DMR also has some additional etiquette around it because of how it functions. With DMR, there are hundreds of talk groups, and the standard etiquette with DMR is that the state-specific and other specific talk groups are like, I'm going to call them calling groups. So for long conversations, you're recommended to move over to a TAC channel, which is a talk around channel, and it's like TAC 310, TAC 311, if you've heard of those. Those are reserved for basically chatting with people. This applies a lot more to DMR Mark than Brandmeister because it's considered the standard. However, with that being put out there, as time goes by, this etiquette does seem to be changing, and people are having longer and longer conversations, like on talk groups like 3124 for Maryland, etc. But the etiquette has always been that you move to a TAC group. Use the other ones more of a calling channel. Okay, with D-Star, if you would like to link the D-Star repeater to a reflector, at a minimum, just check the message to find out if the repeater is already linked. You can do that by doing a couple of things. You can do the information when you click down on the key with the I in the 8th position. It will give you the current link. If the repeater isn't linked, change your call to CQ, and announce your call sign and your intention on the repeater before linking. For example, this is K3DO, linking the reflector to 14 Charlie. So that will give everybody an indication if somebody's using that or not, if it can be moved. If the repeater is already linked, check to make sure there is no one already using the repeater. Connection, first checking unlinking or relinking. For example, this is K3DO. Wanting to connect this repeater to reflector 14 Charlie, is anyone using the repeater? And if there are no objections, then go ahead and complete the linking process. If you're in another town listening to someone else's D-Star repeater and you'd like to link to it, most people probably wouldn't mind, assuming the repeater is idle, but please be as polite as possible if you can. Ask the local operator what the linking policy is. At a minimum, ask on the repeater if anyone minds before linking. Urban D-Star repeaters with many users probably have stricter policies than rural repeaters with fewer users. All right, so that is the document that we've been creating over a couple of years with repeater etiquette. There is one additional thing I would like to add, and I just haven't put it in here yet. And it's from a recent thing that's happened in this area, is if you are going to cross-link your crossband repeat, like from your handheld to your car for some reason to a repeater, please be sure that you have a tone on your input for the crossband. We've recently had somebody who had a crossband repeat set up to the repeater, but didn't have any kind of tone on the receive for the crossband, and it was picking up all kinds of noise and rebroadcasting that to the repeater. It was a new ham, didn't know all the details there, no harm done, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Anyways, I hope you found this etiquette helpful and can pass it around. If anybody has any questions, please post at the bottom. I'll put a link in the comments down below to where you can find this as we keep it updated pretty regularly as we think of new things, but it's been pretty static now for a while. Anyways, that's it. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up down below, and I would appreciate the subscribe to give us another subscriber. Everybody have a great time. 73, this is K3DO.